everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I am Lisa Brazelton here with my co host, Chris Noble. We are from Wisdom from the Edge, and we're here to talk about things that really figure out the best ways for self care practices, self regulation practices. How do we deepen our self awareness? How do we go from where we are and who we think we are and kind of move that into a different space of higher consciousness? And how do we grow and ascend where to different areas that we never really thought were possible in every area of our life? So mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, physically, um, even physiologically. So, welcome, welcome. We're so happy that you're here with us. And today we are going to talk about something that has become a regular topic of a must have called multitasking. And we're going to, because I love to, Chris and I both enjoy pushing the envelope because we are not subscribers of the norm. Who made it up? And why have we now subscribed to this belief system that multitasking is a badge that we wear with honor, when all it really is doing is creating stress and tension and cloudiness and mistakes and depression. So we're going to talk about that today. So let's talk about it, Chris.
Let's talk about it, Lisa. It's that's definitely an area I'm well versed in, and I'm sure everyone listening and watching to this is well versed in multitasking because it's a phenomenon that we everyone experiences because, like you said, it's a badge of honor that we've been conditioned to feel like now I'm productive, now I'm worthy of some form of achievement or praise because I'm overworking myself. In other words, I'm multitasking. I'm doing so many things on this list, and look at how awesome I am because I've got 1,000 things plus, a million more on my to-do list. And yeah, that validates my existence basically. And that's how I used to feel. I used to feel that with my previous businesses, working in corporate land, working in my artistic, creative experiences. I would still bite off way too much. And the way I operate is my body will completely shut down once I hit my breaking point. And it's happened so many times, and we call it burnout, right? And something that we're all very familiar with as well. And I'm sure everyone, once again, experiencing this episode has experienced burnout, and it's rough, and it's also really dangerous because I remember actually many years ago when I owned my previous corporation as a video production company, and I was at a meeting, some business meeting, and I remember this woman was presenting, and she was actually doing this whole presentation on how her brother, who was a tech startup CEO, actually died because of burnout. He worked himself literally to death, and that is not an uncommon phenomenon in this rat race, productivity driven world that we live in. Because I think one of the main reasons is that we surround our worth and our even the meaning for why we exist around our work, around our careers, around how much achievement, how many goals are we accomplishing, and if we're not hitting those, then we're unworthy of love or unworthy of existence. And that sounds dramatic, but I think that even maybe it's more subconsciously that's what's playing. At least that's what it was for me. My self-worth was totally attached to how much work I was getting done. So what are some of the ways that we can navigate this burnout phenomenon. What have you found, Lisa, that's helping? And I know both of us currently are experiencing some busier times. So this is why we were inspired to do the episode today, because we're both getting a lot of really wonderful work, which is great. And at the same time, it's making us really busy. We are multitasking and we're experiencing that feeling of like, oh no, I don't want this to move into burnout. So maybe for our own sake too, how can we, what are ways that we can mitigate this burnout?
Yeah, that's the very first thing that we talked about when I got on the phone with you earlier is who made up the rules? Who started this at the very beginning that our worth had to be wrapped around how much we can do? And if we can unravel this kind of mystery on the programs that we have adapted and adopted and expected and expect from other people, if we can unravel that and figure out what is it for, why is it, and what are the consequences. By the way, consequences both positive and negative, because consequences as a as a word isn't necessarily negative, but consequences can and are often, they show us why multitasking is the quickest way to actually having a shorter lifespan. I mean, that's dramatic, and that's, I'm not trying to be evocative here, but that it really is the truth. We do a whole lot of work with teachers and helping them create really healthy self-care practices so they can use those tools in order to be the same tools that they use as wisdom for students in the classroom. But we expect people to multitask. As a matter of fact, I would go so far as to say that our society, especially the Western world, almost frowns upon people who are not busy on a regular basis. Now there's the L word that comes in. Somehow people are lazy if they've taken time to contemplate their day and to figure out, how to decide what they would like to do for a living. These are things that people would take time to actually do, and we don't have the time to breathe. So what happens is that we make poor decisions because we do not have clarity. And it also breeds this mental, emotional, physical, physiological, spiritual disharmony, which leads to dis-ease, right? And there are many, many ways to avoid it. But I think for this very moment, Chris, I think it's really important for us to address why it has become a norm and how to decide, because we have the choice. The things that we get to choose are how we feel, how we think, and our actions. So this is a choice that we all get to have, but it also comes up against the institutions that expect it. So we can talk until we're blue in the face saying, oh, it's really, really important to have these different practices in order to not have this multitasking mindset. But at the same time, how do we balance our lives in a way that will not have us lose a job?
Yeah.
Or, you know what I'm saying, Chris? I mean,
Yeah.
so I kind of want to go underneath the layers here a little bit, because this is a mindset change. This is a lifestyle change. And I'm just going to give you one example. Yesterday, I normally work throughout the day, have dinner with family, and then I go back and do a little bit more work before I go to sleep. And that has been my norm, only to get everything done and I never get anything. I never get it all done. And then I wake up really early, try to get my self-care practices in, and then it's another full day of that. And I was feeling some anxiety yesterday. Like, what do I want to do? Do I want to just like, do I want to meditate? Yes, I will get to that meditation, but I don't feel like doing that right now. Do you want to watch a movie and go brain dead? No, I don't feel like doing that. Do you want to read a book? No, I don't want anything too heavy. Like there's like, so I couldn't find anything. And so I just laid in bed and I just thought, and it occurred to me about a half an hour in, I wasn't tired, but I was just laying there. I'm like, when was the last time I just really contemplated and I created and I daydreamed and I created different scenarios in my life? I don't remember. And I used to be the daydream queen. I don't remember the last time I did that.
Yeah, it's powerful. Why don't we allow ourselves contemplation? We think about all these spiritual leaders and monks around the world who literally their whole existence is based on contemplation, quiet, peace. Where did we get it wrong? And I think part of it is certainly there's an element of technology. I think we have all these really wonderful tools in a sense. They are positive. Well, they're not positive or negative. They're just a tool. And we have these cell phones, we have these calendars, we have these to-do lists, apps. We have all of these ways, project management software, etc. All these ways that do make it a little easier to do all these things. So then you feel more compelled to add another thing onto the list, right? So there's a bit of an element of that, but I also think with technology comes the reality of, if you go back 100, 150 years, you just didn't have the capabilities to multitask in the way that we multitask today, where, you're doing one side hustle and then you switch in the next hour to a phone call, you switch the next thing to a video, a webinar, and then you switch again and the list goes on and on and on and on. When back in the day, what were you doing? I mean, you probably had one task the whole day, which was tend to the farm or go to the factory maybe that you're working in. But either way, it was very one task centered day. You don't have this list of 1,000 different multifaceted things going on every single day. And now that we have this very connected world technologically, I think that invites sometimes as well as a lot more things to do. But then there's also the philosophy of the Western work culture, and not just Western work culture, but even for that matter, Eastern work culture, because I think in Japan, there's actually a specific word that describes death from overwork. I'm almost positive that the Japanese have a word for that. I can't remember what it is, because it happens so often in their culture that people drop dead because they're working so hard. That's obviously a sign, dramatic sign, that we freak out about a lot of things as a species, but one of the things I think we don't, for some reason, actually give as much awareness to is the fact that we're slowly killing ourselves with this way of living, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't find little ways to readjust, we're moving into a dangerous direction with all that, because it is so glorified in a sense. So
You made me think about something, and I just wrote down ancient cultures. You know, even our indigenous cultures that are around the world, they literally laugh at us. They laugh because they see the ridiculousness of how we live life. And I know this is your area of expertise. If you could just give us any insight as to the way things were in ancient cultures. And we don't have to even go that far. We don't even have to go back to Egypt or Mesopotamia, or, we don't have to go that far to understand that there was a calendar that indigenous and otherwise cultures lived by. And that was in regards to the way in which the astrological, astronomical calendars revolved. And we've gotten so far away from learning from our Mother Earth and her way and her circadian rhythm of, you don't see nature multitasking.
No, nature has one task in each of its, I guess, sub categories of itself, right? Whether it's the leaves on the trees or the river, but it's doing its one thing and one thing only. And it's in a sense the one thing it is doing is existing. That's honestly really all it's actually doing. And then we're trying to make up all these crazy things to do. I think one of the major differences between, let's say, the First Nations people of North America here, indigenous people all around the world, these indigenous tribes and of people that obviously have a completely different relationship to Mother Earth than we do as a Western workaholic society. And when they look at their rhythm of life, it's completely in tune with nature. And because most of these places or most of these peoples don't have a very intense economic system that's also pitted against them, that forces them to be in a rat race every single day because they're just constantly surviving and fighting the financial sort of survival situation, which so many people more and more and more today are falling into. It's a financial prison system that's being essentially created around us. So it creates this fear of having to work just to make ends meet. And these people, these indigenous tribes and First Nations people and Aboriginal people all around the world, they have and continue, at least in some factions today, to live in a way that is out of that crazy rat race that we live in. They are able to survive far more harmoniously because they've got what they need. Everyone works together as a community to make sure everyone's not freaking out about their own survival needs. So then things like money become less important because you're all living in a communal harmony together. Everything is provided. And guess what? When you start to go into those ways of living, you realize that there's abundance everywhere. And it's this planet and this universe is providing us with everything we could ever possibly need. But we get deluded into thinking we have to work our butt off to make a couple of bucks to get crappy GMO food at the grocery store. It's just not, it's not in resonance. We've fallen out of rhythm with our life. And if, yeah, you look at modern day indigenous, Native American, First Nations people as an example now, but yeah, we can also look back into historical times like in ancient Egypt when, if you look at the hieroglyphs and a lot of the way that they depict about what their life was all about then, it was literally all about attuning yourself to the universe, connecting with source, with God or creation, to become one with everyone. The importance and the main sort of MO for them in their life was to connect spiritually with self, with one another, and to love. I mean, where are those teachings now? You don't see that in any form of government or mainstream media. It's the opposite. It's work until you die, just so that you can be worthy of our approval, kind of thing. I mean, we've got such a backwards way of living, and it's an issue. And at the same time, we can move. As we're kind of nearing the end of the episode, we can move into the solutions of this, because I'll give you one quick one right now that I had to use yesterday, because I'm also, hey, we're still living. I live in Vancouver, Canada. It's a big Canadian city, and it's the rat race mentality is alive and well here, even though we also have a decent. Even the corporate people downtown still like to knock it off early on a Friday to go skiing or go surfing or something, and that's cool, and I like that. But it's still a workaholic mentality here. And so one of the things I did yesterday, when I had a very busy day and back to back things, and I was driving out to go to rehearsal for summer concerts that I'm working on, And before I got into the car, I realized I was like, you know what? If this makes me 10 minutes late, so be it. I'm going to take off my shoes. Like, my car was parked beside a park. So I just, before I got into the car and drove away, I was like, no, I'm taking 10 minutes. I took off my shoes, put my feet on the ground. I just stared up at the sun, like what you were doing, Lisa, with when you just stayed in bed and just thought about nothing or everything and whatever. Just let your mind go wherever it wanted to. And I just turned off the brain for a bit. I was just standing in the grass, looking up at the sun, just going like, and breathe, and breathe. Let's take a moment before I go into another work mode, and just that 10 minutes of a bit of nature, a bit of grounding, a bit of earthing, a bit of sun, a bit of vitamin D, a bit of contemplation. That really helped me not lose my mind yesterday. And I would have gone into such a level of stress and exhaustion. It just would not have been healthy for me. So that's like one of many little quick tips. And the one last thing, because I want to hear what you have to say about this too. The one last thing is that I still, the biggest thing for me is that I have to remind myself constantly that that rest and that contemplation is equally as important as the work itself, as the money, as all of that stuff. It is so, so, so important. And it's very easy to forget that.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing, Chris. I love that you are present enough and loving of self enough to decide to not get in that car until you reset, which is really what we're talking about here. Are we saying don't multitask ever again? You shouldn't do it. It's bad. No, we're kind of living in a society, depending on where you live, but here, and I live in Chicago, so this is a mecca for this lifestyle. But as you said, Chris, the importance of the self-care practices that we instill for ourselves will have ripple effects that are in such the positive reservoir that it will give us more life to live. And so, I think that when we are in a place of stillness, even if it's for 5 minutes or 10 minutes throughout our day, and I do this all the time. I set my alarm on my phone. I try not to have back to back calls. That doesn't make sense to me. I have 55-minute calls, or I start my calls 5 minutes after the first of the hour so that I could go to the bathroom, so I can grab some tea or have some water, get up and stretch, take some deep breaths. That's a mainstay for me. But when we get still for a second, then we become present. Think about that. And what happens when we become present? We have less reaction, and we have the ability to respond versus react. And if there's anything that is more important than that, please let me know, because being present is one of the greatest gifts that we've been given. And it will allow us to not only self-care ourselves, but it flows out with all who we interact with. And the other thing that I'm going to say is that multitasking is a scarcity mindset. And the opposite of scarcity is abundance. And that giving of ourselves the moment of breath, of breathing, of pause, of presence, then we're like more malleable. It's the same thing. Like, it reminds me of like going to the gym. There's a lot of people who just like go right at it, but they don't stretch first, right? And we have to stretch. I mean, there's a lot of issues that you could have in your physical body if you don't stretch. Hamstring pulls, whatever, just different pulls. You can lock your knees up, ankles, whatever. There's a lot of things. Most people, if you are tense and then you start working out, you have a more likelihood of injuring yourself. So taking these moments of pause is like stretching before you exercise. Okay. Um, we would love to hear from you, listener. Thank you so much for being a part of it. If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up, subscribe. We would love to hear any questions you have, any experiences that you have. We would just love to hear from you. Thank you so much. Chris, thank you for your wisdom, and thank you for sharing your knowledge and continuing to do the work, because we're doing the work. We're not up here saying, on a mountaintop in renunciation, like we've already done it. No, we're
Not
in the
yet.
process. We're in it.
Yeah.
And it takes a mindful moment to stay present and to know that we get to choose how we want to think and feel and act at any time. That's the power we have.
100%. 100%. Thanks everyone for tuning in today. We appreciate you, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Wisdom from the Edge. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Wisdom from the Edge. It's such a pleasure to have you with us. And make sure, if you haven't already, to follow, like, and subscribe to our channel. We really appreciate that. It actually helps us out quite a lot in growing this platform. And also leave us a comment if you haven't already. We'd love to hear from you, hear your thoughts about what you enjoyed on this episode and things that you want to offer, maybe ideas for a new episode or things that you want to hear more about. Also, make sure to check out our website, wisdomfromtheedge.org. All that is in the description below. And you can learn more about what we do, what offerings we have, and of course, the courses and programs. There's lots to learn from, a lot of really cool resources to check out to enhance your everyday life. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Wisdom from the Edge.